Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Juskewycz of DailyFantasyWinners, and this is another episode of Tee to Green. And for this week's episode, it is the Quicken Loans National. And this is a golf tournament played at Congressional Country Club. It is the blue course specifically at Congressional, and this is played in the Washington, D.C. area. So the Quicken Loans National roughly has about 120 players. It is an invitational tournament, and so it's a little bit smaller of a field. There are usually about 150 players in a tournament. We're down to about 120 in this week's field, but for the cut, it is still the top 70 plus ties. So we're only cutting about 50 or so players as opposed to the roughly 80 or so players. And so we can be a little bit more aggressive with our lineups. We definitely want to keep that in mind. As for this field in particular, though, this year in 2016, it is certainly a weaker field in comparison to years past. I talked about in an episode a few weeks ago about how in the summer schedule, it's going to be very good fields each and every week, and a lot of these tournaments are really good. But I also mentioned that some of these fields that usually are pretty strong might be a little bit weaker within that just because this schedule this summer is very hectic, and we're already seeing evidence of this because the Quicken Loans National and Congressional, this is usually one of the favorite golf courses that the pros like to play at. And so, so it is a weaker field because that is also this tournament is the week after the U.S. Open. It's usually, it's been moved around a few times, but generally speaking is usually 2 weeks after the U.S. Open. Usually the Travelers Championship is this week. So, next week there's also a WGC event at Firestone, which is usually in early August. So a lot of events are switching around in terms of the timing of them, and just at the end of the day, we've got a much weaker field this year when you compare it to years past here at Congressional and the Quicken Loans National. So this is a quick reminder also before we do look at the specifics of Congressional. If you do go back and look at tournament course history, I would look only at specifically 2012 through 2014. The tournament was not at Congressional last year, so that would be the main reason why. It was at Congressional from 2007 through 2009 if you want to go back that far, but nevertheless, that's pretty far back, and I don't think you're going to gain a lot from evidence back then. You can take a look at it if you want, but I just really wouldn't bother with it at the end of the day. But ultimately, also, I just really wouldn't look at tournament history that much here just because the course has, been changing in and out, and also just the strength of the field being different. You're getting a small sample size to begin with, and you're getting moving variables within that small sample size. So I just don't really think this is a great week really to be looking much at course or, tournament history here in terms of how well people have finished. So that's just a quick reminder, but let's take a look at some of the specifics of Congressional. It is a par 71, and it tips out 7,569 yards. This is definitely a longer course. 7,500, anything over 7,500 is long, even if it's a par 72, but even the fact it's a par 71, it's certainly a longer track. There is pretty thick rough at this golf course. It will not be as thick as Oakmont and as nasty as some of that stuff is, but it will still be definitely a golf course that's definitely near the top in golf courses you want to hit the fairway in. Definitely tree-lined fairways on this course. The woods will come into play on some holes as well. There's some water that certainly creeps in on several holes. On hole 6, it definitely comes in by the green, which is entertaining. And hole 18, one of the most I'll say it's one of the best golf holes, quite frankly, on the PGA Tour. It's a par 4 that plays over 500 yards downhill. The green is surrounded by water, basically at the bottom, kind of on a little peninsula, almost. It kind of looks like, if you will, a little bit. Maybe not the best example, but in any case. So in any case, you'll get some hazards creeping into play, and you'll get some unplayable lies certainly coming into play if people do decide to hit into the woods or into some areas where they should not be. There are 3 par 5s on this golf course because it is a par 71. Number 9 at 636 yards cannot be reached in 2 unless somebody's holing out. Nobody's making eagle on this hole. And number 5 at 555 yards and number 16 at 579 yards can be reached in 2 by some of the bombers occasionally, but again, at the end of the day, you usually do not see more than like 10 or 12 eagles here every year. The eagle opportunities are minimal. It will be more strictly limited to the bombers, so you might want to put a tiny bit of emphasis on the longer hitters, but really at the end of the day, I wouldn't when you're just specifically talking about the eagles. Taking a look at some statistics we want to use this week. Taking a look at strokes gained off the tee, strokes gained approaching the green, strokes gained around the green, recent form, and upside. So I choose the strokes gained is, of course, now broken down. They took apart strokes gained tee to green. I mean, they still have it, but they also made some specific statistics out of it. And they made strokes gained tee to green, or off the tee, excuse me, strokes gained approaching the green and strokes gained around the green. So basically driving, approaches, chipping, and then of course they still have the strokes gained putting. If you look at leaderboards in the past, great putt. This is usually a course that doesn't promote like great putters statistically. Good putters can do well here, but just saying we've seen a lot of players do well here that are usually much better tee to green players. This course really does promote great tee to green play because it is very long and you need to hit the fairway. It's not really so much a bombers versus a ball strikers necessarily. Some driving distance can absolutely help, but at the same time, finding the fairway is very important. It's kind of a balance. It's not really just one or the other. It's just very good, strong tee to green game all around. And scrambling is a good thing here, and specifically looking at strokes gained around the green because the rough is very thick around the greens. And it's a little bit more particularly difficult here as far as getting up and down. This is recent form is something we want to look at upside. So upside, we do stuff with FantasyLabs obviously, and as far as promoting them a little bit and using some of their stuff. So in any case, with FantasyLabs, they have a variable called upside in there. And I think it's you don't, whether you're using a model or not, it doesn't really matter. But basically with upside is you want to look for guys that basically can place very highly in the golf tournament because we're focusing on tournaments here, so to speak, in terms of the GPPs, and so we definitely want, obviously, with guys that have the upside here, obviously because we're trying to cash in or finish the highest place possible as opposed to cashing in the top 50% or whatever. There are two things I would really take away though here from the statistics I just mentioned. One is harder courses usually put a bigger emphasis on recent form. That's generally speaking the case, and that's going to be true here. And secondly, this is usually a course that, again, like I said, that does not promote great putters. So again, strong tee to green games, good recent form as of late, and upside is very good. So there isn't too many specifics else I would really look at in terms of this, in terms of birdie or better, bogey avoidance. I think there's a little bit of relevancy in all those in all those areas, but there isn't just a lot of data to go off of in the past here to see what some more specific statistics will do here. Will do well here, and so essentially we want strong tee to green game, good recent form as well. So take a look at weather right now. There is supposed to be rain on Thursday. There is supposed to be wind up to about 15 miles an hour on Thursday afternoon, and there's supposed to be lower winds and great weather all day Friday. So as of right now, as of Tuesday evening, the week of the tournament, there is a definite possibility of a good Thursday morning, Friday afternoon tee time advantage. Keep that in mind. But as I get into the picks, keep in mind that these picks will not reflect the tee time advantage. I don't like doing that this early just because weather changes very often and very quickly. Even with the U.S. Open, we thought we were only going to get up to an inch of rain Wednesday night going into Thursday, or throughout the day Thursday, maybe an inch or a little over an inch of rain at Oakmont on Thursday, and we got over 3 inches. So it changes very dramatically. And so I like waiting until Wednesday night, usually to kind of make a final call, if you will, to tell people or give some advice on Twitter and the Daily Fantasy Winners forum if they should be switching their direction here a little bit. So just keep that in mind. These picks are not based on a tee time advantage, but there definitely could be one coming up here Wednesday night going into the tournament on Thursday. And so with that, let's get into the picks. So before I get into the specifics of it, the pricing this week to me is very interesting, and it's been a little bit more interesting over the last couple weeks. But just take a look at this week. We have players priced from $12,000 starting at Ricky Fowler going all the way down to the lower 5K range. But what we're seeing a lot more of in the last few weeks on DraftKings, and particularly this week, is there are a lot more useful $5,000 players, as in players that are not just random sponsorship exemption guys, that would not have qualified for some tournament otherwise, or random amateur players that got a special, invite type of thing. We're seeing a lot of regular PGA Tour players actually be listed in the 5K range, and this DraftKings almost just basically appears to somewhat be going toward like baseball pricing a little bit, and it's not a great apples to apples comparison, but basically, there's always going to be a handful of players in baseball that are near mid salary that are playable, obviously based on a bunch of different variables between run projection and where they are in the lineup and all that kind of stuff, and it's not the best apples to apples comparison, but nevertheless, for a good amount of time on DraftKings and Daily Fantasy Golf, a lot of those 5K players or even low end 6K players were for the most part unusable a little bit, and there just weren't that many of them. And I think they're really spreading out the pricing of the players more in terms of who's usable and stretching out the price range. And it's a lot more, it's just more accurate. I'll just put it that way. And I think that's just great because I think all golfers in a field should have a reason to be used basically each and every week. And I think it makes the game better just ultimately at the end of the day. And also, and I'll just lastly say, this kind of promotes a little bit more of a studs and scrubs strategy just because they're stretching it out a little bit more this way. And that can particularly apply to this week when we can be a little bit more aggressive with our picks with a smaller field and, fewer people missing the cut after Friday's round. So, okay, let's get into the specifics. Let's start off with the top 3 players. I'm going to do an A list and B list like I've done in the past, for non-major tournaments. The top 3 players are Ricky Fowler at 12,000, Patrick Reed at 11,700, and Jim Furyk at 11,300. Those are the top 3 golfers, and then you have some other guys like Mark Leishman, Justin Thomas, Charlie Hoffman, Gary Woodland, and Ryan Palmer, all at 10 plus K range. Take a step back and think for a minute, because in terms of looking on Twitter, hearing a lot of people talk about this, there's a lot of people not all in on the top 3 guys, that they're more kind of looking into the balanced strategy this week. And I understand that, but here's the way I would look at this and kind of take a step back here and ask yourself a little bit is like, these top 3 guys are, in my estimation, and looking at this, and in terms of the odds, they're much better golfers, really, quite frankly, than the guys that are in the 10K range and what you're going to be paying for them. Because you are still, even if the difference between 11K and 10K, really, that's not that much of a difference, and you're really getting a big bump, in my opinion, between using guys like Fowler, Reed, and Furyk. A lot of the ownership of Ricky Fowler will not be very high, just simply because he has missed his last 3 cuts, and he missed the cut also at the Masters, so he's basically missed the cut at at the 4 biggest tournaments of the year. But this isn't first of all, this is not a hard field, and Ricky Fowler has a great history of when everybody is doubting him, aka when he is called the most overrated player in the game, and then turns around and wins the next week or 2 or whatever it was at the Players Championship, last year and all that. So, like, Fowler has a great history of, when he seems really off, he has an ability to click it right back on, between whether it's winning the Scottish Open, winning the Players Championship. He won earlier this week at Abu Dhabi. He's got a great way of doing this. And so I think with Fowler, he is the best player in this field. And I know he has not had the best form as of late, but nevertheless, I think he is the best player in this field. The odds suggest this, and I don't think he's going to be that popular. And still, even with using him at 12K, I still think you can make some very good lineups. Patrick Reed, obviously a very good player as well, and I think a clear step above everybody else, maybe with the exception of Jim Furyk, when Furyk is healthy, of course, as well. And I think Reed might be probably the most popular play of these top 3 guys, just because Reed has had a very good history of smashing the competition against weaker fields. And Reed is also, while not being the most accurate player off the tee, he's usually very good at making par. Very good scrambler as well. It's one of his best things, and I like those attributes here. And Jim Furyk at $11,300. This is a huge price jump, obviously, from where he has been. If you've been listening to some of my picks over the last few times he's been in the field, I've basically been saying, he shook off the rust in the first couple tournaments, and I said, I would just basically be rostering him at this point on, and because he's gonna turn it around eventually. It's not like Jim all of a sudden forgot how to play golf, or he's completely lost his game. He just needs to shake off a couple weeks of rust, and we clearly saw that at the U.S. Open at Oakmont when he finished tied for second. So with Furyk, I don't think a lot of people are going to love that huge price jump, and I still don't think he'll be owned that much, and I think you're getting great odds for him there. And if we're taking a look at the rest of my picks here, I'm not going to elaborate really on any of these guys too much here in the video. I'm happy to elaborate on this in the Daily Fantasy Winners forum, and then I'm going to have a B list in there as well. But all of these guys I'm about to list are all along the lines of great tee to green games and great recent form, and I don't think any of their ownerships will be over the top, there's no players that I think are horribly mispriced this week. Basically, I think DraftKings did a pretty good job this week. So with that, I will just go ahead and read these off a little bit. At 9,600, Byung Hanan played really good golf at the U.S. Open. He's still like a golfer that, quite frankly, the average golfer or the average viewer of golf, or even the average daily fantasy golfer just doesn't know that much about. Byung Hanan is very good, and he is a future international star. So in any case, I like Byung Hanan the best in the 9,000 range. Three guys in the 8K range, I like Charles Howell III, Jamie Lovemark, and Daniel Summerhays, all three at 82, 82, and 8,100 respectively. Moving on down to 7,000 range, two guys that are definitely in good form, Adam Hadwin and Harold Varner III. A couple guys also playing very well. And then two guys in the 6K range, Anirban Lahiri at 6,800. That's preposterous, actually, to me a little bit. I know he's still up and down a little bit, but his upside is outstanding, and he's done very well in some weaker fields this year. And so Lahiri should, quite frankly, be at least mid 7,000 range in this field. I think that's kind of it's kind of a joke a little bit, to be quite frank. The other guys in the 6,000 range is Lucas Glover at 6,500. Not the greatest recent form as of late, but still awesome tee to green game. A little bit of a weaker field here this year. I could definitely see easily a top 10, quite frankly, out of Lucas Glover, or maybe top 20. And then a couple guys in the 5K range. I think Michael Kim at 5,800 is underpriced, and Kyle Stanley at 5,300 as well. Definitely high upside with Kyle Stanley, with how long he can hit it, and actually has been hitting the ball well late, certainly from an accuracy standpoint as well, which is, of course, good on a tee to green course like Congressional Country Club. And that is it for this video. We will get the B picks up on DailyFantasyWinners.com in the PGA forum section. We will get that up later on tonight, Tuesday, or Wednesday morning. Get those ready for you to make your picks. Wednesday night after the weather situation kind of resolves itself a little bit, or becomes a little bit more clear, I should say. So in any case, if you like this stuff, please remember to like and subscribe to our Twitch and YouTube channels, and of course follow me at Nick Juskewycz, and then on Twitter, and then follow Daily Fantasy Winners on Twitter at DFSnerd. All right, good luck, everybody.